Hello, you wonderful people, and welcome to another episode of Not Too Comic Book. This being a show where I talk about TV shows that are adaptations of comic books. For today's episode, I'm going to talk about the Season 2 premiere of Invincible. A great season premiere. A lot of really interesting things went down in this episode, so let's break it down. So I loved the opening because I felt like, oh man, it seemed like it was maybe a training situation, but then Omni-Man show, I'm like, there's no way like he came back to Earth, but him and Mark being on the same side, I'm like, okay. So I'm like, is this like some dystopian future of like Mark and his dad working together? It's like a possibility of, oh, this is how things can end up, but that doesn't necessarily mean that's how they will. Because I thought this would be a time travel season, but it's not a time travel season. It's a multiverse season. I mean, we might end up having time travel elements to it, but it is a multiverse season, which the timing could not be more perfect. Consider, like, I literally did a video. I didn't even notice going into Invincible. I've never read the comic, so I had no idea where the story was going to go. So, but we get introduced to Angstrom Levy, voiced by Sterling K. Brown, which is pretty dope. So, but yeah, like I said, the timing is interesting because obviously we have a multiverse thing with Loki, and I made a video talking about people probably fatigued of multiverse because I've heard people say that, which I kind of don't agree with, that whole mentality of like there's not that much multiverse stuff out, but once again, that's a whole deeper conversation. So I'm curious how people are going to feel about it. Granted, it was kind of nipped in the bud by the end of the episode. We'll talk about it when we get there, but I'm curious, will that appease some people? I'm sure there's some people that are going to roll their eyes because of the multiverse stuff. It's like, oh really, we're doing it? It's like, I like I said, I don't think it, whatever the case may be, I think they handled it in a very interesting way, but it's also like, especially Angstrom Levy, his timing popping up is so interesting considering the King of the Conqueror of it all in the MCU, so the timing is just, once again, wild because Loki's currently airing at the same time too. So it's so fascinating. But either way, he comes from a place where... Now, he said at first, I didn't agree with my dad. So it makes me wonder in this timeline, in this universe, did Mark work alongside of his dad? Well, not agree with his dad at first, but then eventually changed his mind? Or did he immediately work with him, but then it was like, yeah, it took a while for him to reconcile with everything. Like, maybe he stayed with his dad the moment his dad gave him the conversation. It's like, no, I'm with you, Dad. It makes you wonder, like, how it played out. It's interesting, too, because we learned from one of the Angstroms that, like, in most universes out there, Mark joins forces with his dad. Him not working with dad seems to be in the minority, which is interesting timing too, because there's an episode, I mean, not even an episode, slight spoilers for My Adventures with Superman, it kind of deals with the same thing. Seems like Clark is evil and a conqueror in most universes, except for like the mainline one that we're following in My Adventures with Superman. So it's, once again, interesting timing. I'm not trying to like, once again, I'm not trying to compare and contrast. I was like, oh, I just thought that was just interesting timing. Like, it's just, I was like, oh, that's interesting. Like I said, I think that's going to be maybe that'll continue to be heavily plot relevant going forward. But that we're not here to talk about My Adventures with Superman, which is a great show. I highly recommend you check out. But either way, what I thought was interesting too, because we can see the differences in this world because there's like two robots. There's like, Rudolph in the machine, he's back, like he's in his original body and he's got like the robot with him because obviously he could still do that. But I was like, interesting. So that means in this universe, he never copied Rex's body. So that whole storyline never happened in this universe, or maybe it just didn't work out. Meaning like maybe in this universe, he never broke out the molars to do that. We also see Eve with like a scar and like a cut down hair. We know that Rex is dead. Like a lot of heroes are dead in this universe because like they've conquered Earth. And just the fact is that Mark is just like, yeah, this is actually your fault because you fought back. Speaking the same rhetoric his father was speaking last season. And like, yeah, it's just like, it's so pointless. Like you guys are putting up all this fight. It's like, you shouldn't be, like, it's actually your fault and blaming them for fighting back. So... And the really messed up thing is when he got to Eve, he's like, don't make me, I don't want to kill you. He's like, no, I would never kill you, Eve. And he like, it sounds like he breaks her neck. I was like, you just said you weren't going to kill her. And it's like, oh, he didn't. He paralyzed her. I was like, Jesus. I was like, this is dark as hell. That's so messed up. He's like, we have some people that can look after her. And it's just like, that is all kinds of twisted that he would end up like paralyzing her because I guess I guess maybe in this universe, him and Amber aren't together, but maybe him and Eve were until he went full evil Mark, and now she's against him. But it's like, man. And he's like, oh yeah, you were doing that against those protesters. I was wondering what that was about. I couldn't figure it out. He's like, yeah. I was like, Jesus, you were testing it out on people. It's like, man, this is dark as hell. Angstrom ends up kind of getting teleported away, and everyone ends up... Because they made a point to point out, like, if you look at the IMDb for that one, he's Angstrom 646, I want to say, was his number. I could be mistaken. So I was like, I felt like he was going... I thought he was actually the Angstrom the Molars meet later on. I thought that was the same Angstrom, but it's not. That's a completely different one. And then later on, when we meet all the other Angstroms, once again, the gathering of all the multiverse Angstroms, it turns out he's in the background and stuff like that. They actually focus on him for like multiple times, like at least 2 or 3 times throughout the rest of the episode. You see him at least 2 or 3 times. They focus on him, because I was like, right, a lot of these other worlds have dealt... Well, we don't know if all these Angstroms come from worlds that have dealt with Invincible being evil, but who knows? But this particular Angstrom, the one that survived at the end, I know I'm jumping ahead a lot, but he definitely is the one who... He's definitely the one that survived. That's got to be the same Angstrom, because he's the one that's got the memories of... His memories are blurring between him and all the others. It could be any other of the Angstroms just having that particular Angstrom's memories and treating them as his own, but I feel like it'd probably be more potent for that to be the Angstrom that's alive and blurring his memories with everyone else's. But like I said, they could have all been from a universe where... like Invincible and his dad rule, because it seems like it's a lot of those universes which play out that way. It's also interesting too, because it seems like the Angstrom that the Molars met, the one that's the quote-unquote pacifist, and maybe the others are too, but I mean, at least some of them are. It seems like he's the only one with the power, which I thought was kind of an interesting thing, which I guess that what made him even more unique. Maybe that's the fact of the matter is that because in my head I was thinking like, no, I'm taking it back. It's not. The pacifist, I guess that makes more sense, that the pacifist one that met the Molars, he was the one wearing the helmet and everything. So it's most likely he's getting 646's memory because he's the one that's all about revenge. I'm assuming the others, I mean, we don't really know the other Angstroms enough to really quantify like whose anger and revenge he's really driven by, whose memories are like really like cemented in his head. But it's like, it's not his memories. Because he's the one, I think that's what I was saying. Like before I was like, it'd be more poetic if it's 646. But then I'm like, no, the pacifist, it'd even be more it'd be even more, what's the word I'm looking for? It fit even more. It'd be even more impactful if the pacifist is the one who basically got consumed by a different Angstrom's revenge and stuff like that. So. And speaking of, like, really quickly, I do love that the episode constantly, because everyone's like, because they're waiting for it, because everyone's waiting for their title card drop, and they do it like 4 or 5 times throughout the episode, and it's like, pause, Invincible. But they don't cut to the title card until the end, and I love that we pick up with the season 1's finale title card, and then the title card goes in completely black. I was like, ooh, what are we going to do with that? And then there's a crack. And I was like, interesting, because I guess like almost like space and time cracking apart to some extent, I'm sure. I mean, I'm sure it could also be the representation of the literal mental cracks that are going through everyone's minds right now. Like everyone's kind of going through it. So I think that could be the direction that ends up going. But that could be what that kind of represents. But I think that's, instead of adding blood this season, they're just going to crack the title card more and more as the season progresses. I was like, that's going to be super dope to see what the like season finale title card is going to look like. But anyway, but kind of like rewinding, because I went super deep into all that. So let's kind of take some steps back. We catch up with Mark, and him and Debbie are going through it. Like the world is recovering because it's only been at most a month. They were some parts said a few weeks, but like Cecil was like, yeah, it's been a month. Because maybe some of that like time lapse of Mark going out there helping out like took place over a couple of days. But it's like, yeah, it's been like a month and the world is still recovering. So Chicago's just starting to piece itself back together. The trauma is still there with not just the people of Earth, but also Mark. because he's beating himself up and blaming himself. Like, I should have done more. It's like, yes, you stopped your dad, and your dad would have killed more people if it wasn't for you. But it's like, more people might have survived, but it still doesn't change the fact is I failed to save so many other people because Mark has so much to prove to himself and feels like he has to prove it to the world. Like, I'm not my dad, because he's like, you could also tell by the way he saved people. Mark tried not to be directly seen. Like, people saw him, but he didn't stick around or anything. He's just doing the thing he can to help, to try and make up for his mistakes. And it's just, he doesn't want to be around because I think he's legitimately scared of what the general public's reception of his is. Like, people know he tried to stop and fight Omni-Man, but it's like their fight in general killed a lot of people too. So it's just that guilt he's racking himself around. I mean, he even talked about it with Eve. It's like all he ever wanted to be when he grew up was to be his dad. And now it's just coming to terms with who his dad is, what his dad did. Not only did your dad kill so many people, not only did he kill the Guardians of the Globe, he also almost killed you and would have, you know? And all of that still, it's been a month. The trauma, that everyone is scarred. There's no getting away from that. And, in Mark's case, I mean, and even in Debbie's case, I love that conversation she had with Olga, where Olga was like, it's okay. Because when she showed up and she's like, oh, I thought you were going to kill me with the knife. Oh, no, that's too light on the nose. If anything, I would poison you. And they both laugh about it. But it's like, and she's there to hold Debbie, be like, hey, it's okay to be sad, to be angry. It's like when Joseph died, like, I felt the same way. And Debbie, like, once again, just all the raw emotions she's feeling. It's like, he killed so many people. He almost killed our son. And then he called me a pet. He called me a goddamn fucking pet. It's like, yo. And Debbie has every right to be angry. It's like 20 years we were together, and he treats me and calls me a goddamn fucking pet. No, fuck that. She has every right to be angry, but her and Mark are doing the exact same thing. Mark's a little more, I don't know if ambivalent would be the word. He's a lot more being like, I don't know if I'm okay. But he is trying to be okay, whereas Debbie's trying to put on, because she feels she has to be strong for Mark. I mean, we even saw it in the season finale. She waited till she was in her room, and she doesn't know that Mark saw her in her bed crying, because, it's just, she has to be strong for her son. So it's like, I have to be okay for his sake. Because I think she also feels guilty. It's like, I can't feel like so many people died. I can't be like, almost feels like they both feel like they don't have the right to be sad. They have the right to be sad, to be angry, to be hurt. All those feelings are valid, but they don't feel like they're validated, because it's like, for Debbie, it's like, I spent 20 years with this guy and I didn't know how much of a monster he was. And maybe if I figured things out sooner, maybe all those people will be alive. Mark's thinking like, maybe if I saw who my dad was, maybe if I was stronger, if I was faster, I could have beaten my dad. I could have stopped all that death and destruction. I could have stopped him, but instead our fight, it was a one-sided ass whooping on my part. My dad whooped my ass, and so many people died as a byproduct of me and our fight. So it's just like reconciling that guilt. It's just going to be a big part of this season, and I think it's a good thing that we died. It's like, right, because you think based on the ending, like Mark was going to be like, oh, we're trudging along. Hey, I'm gonna go back to school. Seems like he hasn't gone back in this past month. Because I think he was trying to put on a good front for Alan, like, oh, everything's okay. It was still super fresh at that point in time, but now it's like even more distance has kind of caused that to kind of creep up more and more, that trauma, that fear. And he's also, because we saw two of the bad guys from that episode, the Machine Head episode, the two of the guys that he had hired, and Mark was about to fight them, but you could tell he was angry, but he was thinking back to his dad, and then he kind of like stops himself because he doesn't want to give into his anger, because he's like, once again, wants to prove to the world and himself, I'm not my dad. I'm not going to be driven crazy by my anger, but it's there in the Viltrumite blood. We saw it moments throughout last season that when Mark got angry, it's when he got stronger. It's like something in the Viltrumite blood. If you don't keep that at a level demeanor enough, like you can obviously go homicidal and lose yourself in it, because we've seen Mark lose himself in that anger. So, and we've seen that kind of like struggle his dad had as well. I mean, that whole ass whooping was driven by anger and disappointment, in Mark's decision, but also like we've seen even in the Adam Eve special that how like his face was so like, he was so like such extreme levels of sorrow and anger were balancing all at once. And so for Omni-Man to feel that at the end of the Adam Eve special, and now to kind of have Debbie and Mark both dealing with that themselves. Very poetic. He wants to focus on the whole superhero thing, but Cecil's telling him live his life. Look after your mom, get good grades. You want to go to college, right? Be with your girlfriend Amber. Like, live your life in that regard. And so, when it's all said and done, Mark does find out him and Amber are going to the same college, and so how that turned out. I'm also curious because obviously we didn't get any William this episode, so I'm curious to see what that's like because Mark did go back to school, and I love Todd being like, "Hey, Mark Grayson, I'm so sorry about what your dad." He's like, "I don't know what I'd do if I'd never see my dad again." He's like, "I get what you're trying to do, Todd. It's sweet, but it's not working the way you thought." He's like, "Yeah, I mean, your dad was kind of a muscle dude. I mean, I bet you wished. I bet you're sad that you didn't get those genes or whatever." And I love just when it was all over, he's like, "See, I'm not an asshole. I'm not an asshole." It's like, because once again, the attempt was very, I appreciate the sentiment, Todd. You try not to be an asshole. I do like that. Because it's obviously such a public thing that everyone knows, like, oh my God, his dad died. Obviously, once again, the world doesn't know his dad was Omni-Man, but it's still the thing of, hey, people, they faked your dad's death. Didn't they make it like a gas leak or something exploded? Because there is that house across the lane from them, which is the house that Donald and them were posted up, which, speaking of, Donald's alive. I also love, we did not tackle that at all this episode, so I'm wondering, did they clone Donald? I wonder, does Donald have multiple clones? Because we just kind of like, yeah, Donald's alive. I'm like, and we don't even touch on it this episode, and maybe I'd assume they touch on it at some point in the season, but it's not important right now. It probably won't come up until like Donald dies again, and then we'll find out like, okay, this is how Donald's still alive. Because if I remember correctly, because I think I heard from people last season, Donald didn't die in the comics. So him dying in episode 7 of last season shocked a lot of people who are more familiar with the comics. They're like, oh, there's no way. Well, did they just kill off Donald because he's not dead? Who knows where? Because the storyline of Invincible, I do know, goes on for a very, very long time in universe. It's not, is what I'm saying, like, because Viltrumites live for a long time, right? So eventually he would have died, but we don't know, like, for a certain section of the story, it's like, well, he wouldn't be dying this early in the story. Once again, like, things are being changed around. Some things are being added, some things are being modified, some stuff is being pushed up, and at least the storylines might be started, but you might not get the full payoff to them for later. It's just, that's the discussion people had around season 1, those who were more familiar with the comic. But either way, I didn't finish talking about this with Debbie, but I am curious what that card is, because Olga's like, oh yeah, like, go to this place. It's probably like, maybe like a superhero support group of like some trauma of like, you were together with a superhero and they died. Like, maybe there's a support group, because Olga's like, they helped me and maybe they'll help you. It's like a black card, which I'm like, all right, feels very ominous, because it's like, okay, you can't help out Mark until you help yourself. Now, Debbie's reluctant to accept it, but I think she eventually will. But I'm just curious to see what that plot line ends up being. If that's going to be something good, or is that going to be something kind of sad and twisted with this world in the series? You don't know how things are going to, like, what the fallout of situations are going to be. We actually catch up with our Guardians of the Globe, them working better as a team, but still not at their A game. Obviously, their fight against Battle Beast and them, well, mainly all the Machine Head's other people, because obviously couldn't do shit against Battle Beast. But yeah, all against Machine Head and its other hired goons. Like, we saw that, and we saw them working together to help people in the aftermath of Mark and Nolan's fight. But they're still not the well-oiled machine that it's still like, right, casualties still sadly happened, even in that battle. And Cecil's down there, jumping down our throats. It's like, because you guys need to step up. This world needs a new set of heroes, especially because they need to help heal the scars that were left by Nolan. But also, the fact is, if he ever comes back, him or any of his people, this world's going to need upgraded fighters. And you're going to need to be in your best shape if you're going to even come close to standing a chance against him, when even Mark couldn't even go toe-to-toe with him. We also have Rudy kind of adjusting to things. We kind of hear from Monster Girl because she's like, "Oh, you were afraid. It's fear. It's something new that you're getting acquainted with. Just like, hey, you getting acquainted with using the bathroom for the first time and stuff." Because I think it's interesting. I was curious like how Rudy was going to handle things going forward. So obviously, when it comes to the whole robot of it all, I thought he does handle everything more. I guess autonomously, like from far away and just kind of control them. But it's like, no, he's more Iron Man in this because he's actually in the suit. He wants to be in the, he wants to be in the action too. It's like, if they're going to be putting their lives on the line, I think for Rudy, it's almost a situation of, I want to be in the same boat. But also because it's like Monster Girl's out there too. And their situation, we don't know fully how far that's going. But speaking of Rudy, he's been kicked away from being the, leader. In fact, Immortals come back to be the leader of the team because the team's kind of had failed leadership. And even Rudy's like, no, I get it. It sucks. It bothers Rudy, but it's also like, I'm adjusting to my new body and I've got to accept orders. But Monster Girl's kind of like, yeah, that is some bullshit that like Cecil kind of did that to you. But yeah, Immortals back with the Guardians, which obviously we know him and Samson have history as we saw. Well, because I'd completely forgot, like, because I talked about it during the Adam Eve special. Like, I did not remember Samson was a part, but it's like, yeah, that does get referenced. I think when he first pops up in episode 3, I think it happens in episode 3, they talked about it because that's where they're putting together the new Guardians of the Globe. I think they reference it then that he used to be part of the Guardian. I had completely forgotten about that. I'm curious to see kind of what that dynamic is like. There's also the whole situation with a new member being added, Bulletproof, voiced by Jay Farrow, interestingly enough. And we don't really know his thing yet. And I love Rex was trying to like still be his douchebag self, but Bulletproof was like, oh, come on, man, be better. He was like, no, I was trying to be better. Like, he's the smart aleck, but I guess like Bulletproof is also like his counter in that regard, and it ends up kind of shutting him down. So it's gonna be interesting to see what that dynamic looks like. We only got like a little taste of it this episode, so we don't really know what his deal is, and also like what his dynamic is going to be like with Rex as well as the rest of the Guardians. So, but he was able to kind of shut Rex up, which no one has been able to do except for Cecil. But even then, Rex is still kind of a loud mouth piece of shit. So we'll see. But I brought it up earlier, but let's circle back to the Molars. I love that they're talking to Pete, and Pete's just like, yeah, back away. They're like, oh, you're not going to give us any good food. Like, come on, we didn't kill you. We could have ripped out your spine and everything, but the fact is we didn't kill you means we like you, so that when we do eventually get out of here again, we won't kill you. And he's like, yeah, sure, whatever. You're not getting out of here. We boosted up security like crazy, and then seconds later, portals open up, and they both escape. And Angstrom had... And I think it's so interesting how his powers work. He can move between dimensions, but it is like a very exact power in that the only way he could get to the bunker, the underground prison that they're in, is he had to go to where a hole is. He had to go to a dimension where that hole was. It's like, okay, like unless he wanted to dig it himself. But okay, where this prison is, there's a giant hole because I guess the prison got destroyed in one universe. And we even see Pete's dead body. But yeah, like he had to go to that specific spot, open portals to where their cells are inside the prison. It's like, that's so interesting because he can't open portals in that dimension like to move around. He has to walk everywhere or use a vehicle in that universe, but he can like he will always like it's space travel, as in that he stays in the exact same spot, but he travels to that same spot in a different dimension, which is so interesting. So it's not like he can teleport all over the place. The power, it has its uses, but I mean, obviously you can use that combat-wise when you're able to get away from someone just by popping into another dimension and then popping back around. It's so interesting. I mean, it's very Doctor Strange-esque in that capacity. I mean, I'm sure that is kind of what this is going for in a lot of ways. But he wants to work with the Molars. I thought his initial plan was like he was going to try and copy himself, but it turns out no, he wants to take the machine that they used to copy themselves, even with the whole Rudy and robot situation of last season. He wants to basically meld the knowledge of all the other versions of himself across the multiverse. He's gathered quite a few in this universe. He's gathered quite a few in other universes all around, and basically wants to connect their collective multiverse knowledge. And it's like, because that way we can, he has the best of intention of, okay, this universe has a cure for cancer. This universe has dealt with hunger. Like every issue that can exist, we could all have this collective knowledge and use it to help different universes, want to kind of help the multiverse in that way. Once again, very, very good intentions. And so when the time comes, the Molars help them, but Invincible kind of steps in. And obviously the other Molars from our other universes, because I love that our Molars thought like, oh, we're something special because he told us we were. But then it's like, oh, like eventually, like when you help me, I'll give you your own pocket dimension. I'll give you not your own pocket dimension, your own dimension. There's no superheroes. There's good food, and you're treated like gods. Is kind of what they wanted. Because they were reluctant, considering the last time they worked with someone outside of themselves, they got screwed over. That being Rudolph/Robot. Because Invincible is working with Cecil now. Because it's like, right, I'll follow orders. I just want to get back out there. But like I said, Cecil was like, you need to kind of make sure your head's on straight, kid. But even he was talking to Donald, and it's like, even he doesn't fully trust Mark. Despite everything Mark did, he doesn't have Cecil's trust. Because it's like, right, I made that mistake with Nolan. I'm not going to do it again. This kid's going to be on a very, very short leash. And then even Immortal calls him out at the end of the episode, like, I don't trust you, so I'm going to be keeping an eye on you. It's like, because it's like, you are more like your dad than anyone's willing to, like, you could easily break bad like your dad. To be fair, his dad came here with the worst intention. Like, this was always his dad's plan. Mark was just living his life, wanted to be like his dad. But you also had to check out the fact, we also have to acknowledge the fact is, in a lot of universes, Mark does become like his dad. So, yeah, but all the Maulers end up joining up, and they end up beating the crap out of Invincible. But for Angstrom, it's like, I don't want my utopia to be built on blood. So he takes off the helmet to try and stop them. But it causes an explosion that kills 99% of the Maulers, all of them, and ends up killing 99% of the Angstroms. And Mark is beating himself up over it, because it's like, not only like, even the Maulers being bad, none of them deserve that. Plus that Angstrom guy, like, I didn't know what was going on here. And Cecil's trying to be like, hey, listen to Rex, it's okay. Like, that would have been a dangerous situation. But the problem is, like, going into that situation, like, maybe if, like, Cecil had let him approach that situation a little differently, maybe you wouldn't have created what is potentially a villain in Angstrom. To be fair, it's like, is he a villain? It's like, he probably will be, but only from the purpose, from the point of view of he's going after Mark because he wants revenge for what happened to all his friends. So many lives were lost because of Mark and Omni-Man. Not only in this universe, which once again, that's all Omni-Man, but Mark still takes on that blame. And I'm sure there will be people who blame Mark, but obviously from his universe, it was Mark and Nolan together doing the damage. So it's definitely going to be interesting. There is a life lesson that that everyone's kind of learning this episode, just once again finding their way forward. But even the Molar, who's like, yo, like, half my body got cooked. So like, yeah, I'm definitely never working with someone outside of me and one of my clones again. I wonder, is he going to be permanently scarred, or will he eventually like make another clone, kill himself, and then like let that clone eventually make another? I mean, maybe that would be our way of, because their whole shtick is supposed to be, we're not supposed to be able to distinguish between who's the original and who isn't. But if you have like a signature like that, I mean, that probably means like any other clone he makes, well, to be fair, any clone he makes might be the same way. You'd assume not. But I mean, we have no idea whether that explosion affected him on a molecular level, or just on a DNA and molecular level, or just on a physical, like, skin level. We'll ultimately have to wait and see, but just a great setup for the season. So excited to have more Invincible. If I remember correctly, I think we're only getting half of the season week to week. I think after episode 4, it goes on a break, and we don't get the next episodes until, I don't know if it's early next year or a little bit into next. I don't remember, but we're definitely only getting half the season now. But either way, I'm excited to see where this season takes us, because I saw the teaser trailer for this, but I've not seen the official trailer because I wanted to avoid seeing as much as possible when it comes to this season. So I'm excited to see where all of this ends up taking us. It's been a while since I saw the teaser too, so I don't even fully remember everything that we see in it. So, but yeah, that's really all I wanted to talk about. Till the next time we meet, be happy, be safe, live life to the fullest, and enjoy it. Good day and goodbye.